Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that this particular half hour is going to be conducted in English, for which I apologise. My name's Andrew Barnett. I'm the director of the UK branch of the Gulbenkian Foundation. It's always a huge pleasure for me to come here to our headquarters. And not just because of the weather, but the audience is always so amenable. Although I know that the slot after lunch is always a difficult one. Not, I think, a complex or wicked problem, unless somebody has denied you lunch. But we will endeavour to enliven the proceedings during what will be half an hour as we veer from the enormity of the discussions that we've had this morning to some specificity and a focus on a particular example of work which we've supported at the UK branch for the past 5 or so years. Allow me, first of all, because I know you're all familiar with the work of the Foundation here, to give you a quick snapshot of the work that we do from our offices in London. For though there are similarities, and we are proudly and definitively part of the Foundation, we differ in the way that we approach things to a small extent, and I'll explain why. The first is that is simply one of scale. We are about 3.5% of the Foundation's total spend. So the money that we give out in grants is about £2 million a year, significantly smaller than the operation that's run from here. And because the UK is a much larger country and there is inevitably a more crowded environment within which to operate. So we're a very, very small player, and that requires us to be much, much more focused if we're going to try to address some of the problems which we've been referring to this morning. So focus is really important to us. The other is that we're very much focused at the early stage of trying to address problems. And though we look at problems across the cycle, it means our limited means enable us only to invest at the very beginning of some of those change processes. But we remain intent on trying to address some of the complex, some people may call them wicked problems of our day, whether loneliness in old age and considering how we can, for example, enable people to better navigate the transitions which people experience in later age. Whether the problems associated with the depletion of resources in our oceans and the deleterious effect on human well-being of that, whether the full and proper inclusion of people who are vulnerable and or underserved in our cultural life, or indeed the problems which Ollie here is going to talk about today. We do prioritise the taking of a systematic perspective to addressing problems, trying to catalyse change over the superficial attractions of short-term, more attributable outcomes, which some funders are completely reasonable reasons, try and locate themselves in. We are prepared to delay the impact. And I think that's something which the freedom which we enjoy as an independent trust and foundation gives us. It's quite interesting. I've been looking at 2 particular articles in the Stanford Social Innovation Review recently, one of which was about how funders fund innovation. And it seemed to emphasize a sort of what I call all-comers approach, which is just put yourself out there and say, come to us with good ideas. And it excluded, interestingly, the approach which we take, which is more associated with identifying a very specific problem and then saying to people, who's interested in helping us solve this? And building a coalition of organisations and individuals, drawing on a range of disciplines who are interested in working for a period of time in developing a strategy. Which leads me to the other article which I read, which was talking about how you strategise for addressing complex or wicked problems. And the essence of that really was about perpetual iteration. For though we have some very clear outcomes that we want to seek over the long term, we also build into our approach adaptability and flexibility. We keep iterating. And this is something which, within the field of what variously is called either complex needs or multiple needs is something which, with Ollie Hilbury, we've been working on for 5 years, trying to address the deep-seated problems experienced by people who have experienced either homelessness, mental ill health, problematic substance abuse, or offending. And whether these are problems which are complex or wicked, I don't know, but they're certainly deep-seated. And they are problematized by a population which very often fails to recognize the problems. The numbers of people are relatively few, but their problems are deep. And we've been doing our best to try and address those over the past 5 years. Ollie has been leading that project, and it's a pleasure to hand over him to present to you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Ollie Hilbury from the Making Every Dot Matter coalition in the UK. And as Andrew said, I think we've drawn the short straw. We have the post-lunch slot today. So I hope you've had a good lunch. I hope you're ready for some more presentations. Don't worry, it's not an examination, but there might be a few questions at the end. So listen carefully, and hopefully we can tell you a little bit about our work here. I want to start with a couple of thank yous. First to the Gulbenkian Foundation here in Portugal for inviting us here today, and all the other partners that are involved in the conference preparations. To Andrew and his team in London for supporting the work that we do at Making Every Dot Matter. And finally to some colleagues here, to Hugo, who's been so helpful at the Gulbenkian Foundation, to Henrik at Kaish, and to all the staff at Santa Casa yesterday, who took me out and showed me some of the great work that you're doing across the city for homeless and vulnerable people here in Lisbon. So I've had a good day. Yesterday I've been immersed in some of the work that you've been doing, and I hope that some of the lessons that we have here from the UK you'll be able to take and use and develop here in Lisbon. This morning we heard 2 great presentations about the theory of tackling wicked problems. This afternoon we hope to say a little bit about how we can do work in practice, and to tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the UK on this issue. So a number of things I'd like to do. First, I'd like to introduce to you the organisation which I direct, Making Every Adult Matter. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about the problem that we're trying to address, multiple needs. What is it? To say something about why we collaborate, to say something about the practical work that we're doing on the ground. So what is it that we're doing day to day to try and address this problem? Then to look at what the impact of that is. And then to talk a little bit about how we kind of make this different way of working stick. How do we make it systemic? How do we make it sustainable? So first up, I want to introduce Making Every Adult Matter, and I did this with some colleagues yesterday. So MEAM is a coalition of 4 national charities in England: Clinks, Drugscope, Homeless Link and Mind. And each of those charities is the membership body for their respective sectors. So as an example, Homeless Link is a membership body for any agency or organisation working on homelessness issues in the UK. So if you're working as a day centre or a hostel or an accommodation for homeless people, you may be a member of Homeless Link. And through that you get voice and representation to government, and you get a lot of help and support to develop your services and make them better. The other organisations in MEAM are the same for the criminal justice, drug treatment and the mental health sectors. So here we have 4 membership charities who each together represent about 1,600 frontline agencies working on the ground in England, from your very largest providers right down to your very smallest. And MEAM, Making Every Adult Matter, or MEAM as we call it, was formed because of a recognition that people with multiple needs bounce between all of those services and never quite get the help that they need. And our remit is to focus on policy and practice change that we can make to address that issue. So first of all then, what is multiple needs? What are we talking about? We're interested in people who are facing a combination of issues around homelessness, criminal justice, substance misuse issues, so drugs and alcohol, and mental health issues. We believe that there are about 60,000 people in the UK who have those issues, but who also have very ineffective contact with services. And our interest is not so much in the issues. The issues are, as Philip said earlier, just human issues. We're interested in the fact that when you have a lot of these issues in your life, you often end up getting very poor service response from local agencies. So if you've just got a drug problem, then a drug treatment service can help you quite well. If you've just got a housing problem, then the same would be true. But when you start to have these multiple issues in your life, these complications, then our services, our public and our voluntary services, fail these individuals, and they end up leading very chaotic lives. And I don't need to tell you about these people. You know these individuals. You'll see them around the streets of this city and in every other city in the world. They recycle around services, never quite getting the help that they need, bouncing between different interventions with no one giving them any help. Some stats from our work, just to give a picture. So from people we worked with, 81% had been in prison, 80% were homeless. They were drinking on average 133 units of alcohol a week. All but one of them were unemployed. 48% had been victims of crime. 44% were involved in mental health services. 36% had been looked after by the state in care as a child. 35% rated their health as bad or very bad. And on the other side of this slide, information about how long they've been involved with services. So average length of involvement with homelessness services, 23 years, often since they were very sort of young age. Substance misuse issues, 7-year average, 19 years old when they first got involved. Mental health, 8-year average, 15 years old when they first got involved. So lots of people with a long history of being involved in these services. This is a graph to show this pictorially. So this is an indication of one individual. I think this graph covers about a year and a half of an individual's time. The top line is all the kind of interventions that were planned interventions. So things like housing support, meetings with different agencies around housing or substance misuse. Everything below the line is what we might call bad interventions, criminal justice interventions, sectioning interventions, court interventions, arrests. And you can see just for one individual the number of contacts that they've had with agencies. Yet this individual fails to move forward, fails to improve their life because we as services fail to give them the support that they need. So failure to tackle this problem is, it leads to a lot of really obvious things, but here's just a few. So obviously a loss of an individual's potential. This is a personal problem for people. A big negative impact on communities. No one likes the kind of behavior that comes from these kind of individuals being on the streets in the condition that they are. A big opportunity cost on services. So when you go to the hospital, if it's full of people with multiple problems, you obviously get a longer waiting line. If you're the police and you spend a lot of time arresting these individuals, you obviously can't police the rest of your patch. So significant opportunity cost. And big cost to the public purse. So a lot of money spent with very poor outcomes made. So why did MEAM want to collaborate on this issue? What was it that drew us together to work together? Well, we believe that collaboration is the best way to tackle intractable problems. And I think there's sort of similar language being used by Nancy and Philip this morning. So problems which don't have any solution or any clear solution, no clear identification of the problem. We believe that collaboration is the best way to deal with those. It pools our resources and our expertise. It means we can be greater than the sum of our parts. We passionately believe that no one service can solve this issue by themselves. So the homelessness sector can't solve this by itself, nor can mental health, nor can substance misuse. We believe that collaboration is always better than a one-size-fits-all service intervention. Finally, we understand that the world is a messy place, and we're quite comfortable with that. We really don't mind. The world is messy, people are messy, and we're very happy for our collaboration to also be a messy mix of the best way forward. So MEAM is very comfortable with that way of working in our collaboration. So our vision is that in every local area, people with multiple needs are supported by services which are effective and coordinated. They talk to each other, they offer a personalised response for individuals. So that individuals are empowered to tackle their problems, reach their full potential, and contribute to their communities. In 2010-11, we spent some time developing a series of pilots to understand how we could make this work in local areas. We asked our memberships in those areas to work better together, and we evaluated the impact really closely. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that later. I'm going to tell you about the MEAM approach that we developed as a way forward from that. But before I do, I want to show you a video about a lady called Leah. who has received some support from one of these coordinated interventions. So we're just going to watch a short film about Leah.
It had been going on a long time. I mean, a very long time. Like, the police had been around so many times and even begged me to press charges. It was when he actually said to me, I think I could kill you. That kind of hit home a bit. Since I was a child, I've had social workers and things. I wasn't brought up by my parents, I was brought up by my grandparents, and because of the things I went through as a child, I got quite poorly and ended up having to spend some time in a hospital. While I was in there, I got abused by a male nurse who then went to prison. I was moving about everywhere and then I got real heavy on the drugs. I was on heroin and crack and a lot of things over the years. And then that's when my ex-partner come in and he kind of stopped that. Even though I'd come away from the drugs, because of the person that I was with, it was all over the place. I'd never know how he would be from one day to the next. I didn't dare go out because it would cause an argument. It would always end up in the whole place getting smashed. So I'd wake up and there'd be glass everywhere. My name kept getting flagged up with the police because of my violent partner. And that's kind of when I met Tom and Gail. It was another day, another normal fight, but I just had enough. I just got to the point where I was getting quite a bit of support, and I'd been clean for so long, and I knew I didn't have to put up with it anymore. And then I left. And Tom was on the phone, and he'd arranged that if I hadn't got out of the house within 10 minutes, that the police would be there. At the moment, I'm living in hotel, hostel-y kind of place. So I'm looking really forward to moving and getting on with my life, really. And getting out of B&Bs and hotels. So it'll be great when I get to my own place. If I looked back to 12 months ago, there's no way I would have thought I'd be here now. I don't think even a lot of people thought I'd be here now. If it wasn't for the fact that I had that support, I would not have left. Because I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have had a clue how to do it myself. All I've ever really wanted, really, is to have my son, have my own family, do my own, just normal, just to have Christmases and birthdays and holidays and things. And I wouldn't have thought it would have been possible, but it looks like it will be now. It looks like in the next, I'm not going to say a time frame because I know it will, I know it is possible now. So I don't need to give a time frame because I know it will happen. I'm positive it will happen now.
Thanks, everyone. It's a very brave thing for Leah to do to make that video, so I wonder if we might just show her some appreciation. So what I'd like to do is just talk to you about how we at MEAM help local areas to design and deliver those kind of services, about how we help them to think about coordination and about how they might take that forward and develop it and make it sustainable in their local areas. This is the MEAM approach. It's been developed on the basis of those pilots that I spoke to you about, and it has a series of different sections within it, a series of elements. It's a non-prescriptive framework, so we say to local areas, these are the 7 things that we think you need to think about if you want to develop a more coordinated, more effective way of working. But we're not going to tell you how to do that within each of them. We're just saying that based on our experience, if you don't do something in each of these 7 sections, your intervention is unlikely to work as well as it should. So I'm going to talk to you about them in a bit later, but they are, as you can see, partnership and audit, consistency for client identification, coordination for clients and services, flexible responses from local agencies, service improvement and gap filling, measuring success, and sustainability and systems change. So what I wanted to do is just talk to you a little bit about each of these 7 elements and give you a bit of an overview about what they are. So the first thing we do when we go to a local area is we look at who's there, who's around the table, what's the partnership. And we look for areas that want to develop something that is for an area as a whole. So we're looking for partnerships that cover private, public, and voluntary players in a locality, anyone who might be engaging with this group. So we're looking for homelessness agencies, substance misuse agencies, mental health teams, local councils, statutory players as well as voluntary ones. And we're looking very much to see if they are working together. We're interested in working with people like the police because they engage with this group all the time, yet often people don't see the police as a service. You know, they see the police as just doing their job of maintaining the law. But in fact, you want the police around the table if you're going to develop something like this. So we look and we try and develop really tight partnerships. And I think as we go through this, we might see some of the things that were being spoken about in theory this morning coming out. So this one is very much about saying, okay, how do we get the right people around the table? How do we get the right group of people together to try and solve this problem? The second one is about consistency. So we want local areas to kind of understand the problem. And again, this is one of the theoretical elements that you heard about this morning. Lots of people have got a very different idea about what multiple needs means. And I'm sure if we sit down in Lisbon with all those different agencies, people will have very different views about how to describe it or who might fall into the group or who might not. So we work with local areas to try and help them define that, and we have some tools to help them do so. And we ask them to focus on the 15 or 20 most chaotic people that they can find. In a city the size of Lisbon, you're probably going to have a larger number of people, but in a small town, there's probably 15 or 20 people. And if you ask all those different agencies to name their top 10, their top 15 people, you'll find that the names will start to match because all those different services, they know these individuals and they've seen them. And then that group that I mentioned earlier, they sit down and they prioritize who they want to work with. So together as a group, they choose the 15 or 20 people that they're going to focus on. Then we say to them, okay, well, how are you going to create effective coordination for this group of individuals? So I think that we know through the work that we've done in the past that coordination is really important. We've got to have a way to help an individual move through the services and provide some personalized day-to-day support. So we, in many of our services, we use a navigator or a coordinator. But we're really clear with areas that if they've got a better idea or if they've got something else they want to test or innovate, then by all means they should try. But there's some principles that we should be thinking about. The first one is that individual has to be able to operate outside of an organizational boundary. So they have to be doing something which is more than their previous job, if you see what I mean. So we often find a situation where if you work in a mental health charity, you would go to an individual and you say, I'm here, I'm the mental health worker, I'm here to fix your mental health. Or if you're a substance misuse worker, you take the same approach. You know, my job is drugs, so I'm going to help you fix your drug problem. But actually what we do with these coordinators is give them a managerial remit to actually have no remit, if that makes sense. So to give them the opportunity to do whatever is right for that client. So to go to a client on the street and actually say, what do you want to do first? Rather than, this is what I've got, or this is what my organization has got, do you want it? So, you know, we want it to be very focused on what they want to do first and the problems that they want to fix first. And we find that if we give these coordinators the managerial remit from that partnership to do that, and they have the kind of okay from all the agencies in the city, then it can make a big difference. But we also know that coordination by itself would be pointless if we didn't have some flexibility from other services. So if mainstream services kept just doing what they're doing, closing their doors, excluding this group, not working well with them, the coordinators would just get nowhere. They would just keep bumping into closed doors. So we work with local areas to say, how are you going to ensure that services are flexible for this group? You could look at it in terms of strategy. So you could say, right, well, we're going to demand that services do this. You could look at it culturally and say, well, we're going to work to understand what it is that frontline workers need to do to be better at this. Or you could look at it in economic terms. So you could say, well, we're funding these services. We're now going to have different requirements for what they do, or to incentivize them through different payment methods. In our pilots, we used the strategic method. So on the right of this slide, you can see we had a board of senior directors. So we pulled together all the directors from those services across the city, from all the statutory and voluntary agencies. And we got them to commit to doing something differently for this group and to make sure that their staff also did something differently in their day-to-day work. We had an operational group of managers whose job it was to kind of make that happen on the ground. And then we had the coordinator who was able to come to those groups and demand that action happen. So we'd be able to say, I've got this client, this is what they need, we've agreed that we have a strategic objective to help these individuals, let's do that work now, rather than waiting a long time, for example. So once areas have set this up, and once they've developed something coordinated, we'll then say to them, is there anything that's missing? And we'll want to make sure that they do this only after they've been through the rest of the process. Because our general feeling is that this stuff is there already. You know, the City of Lisbon, for example, it has a lot of the services that it needs to support this group, but potentially the problem is that they don't work so well together and that they don't talk so well together. So you can't look at gaps until you've solved the issue of better coordination and agreeing some flexibility. Then we'll say to them, you need to measure your success. You need to do that from day one. You need to be really clear about what difference you're going to make, because if you have any hope of changing the system, you've got to have something to show how you're doing it. This is a list of areas across the United Kingdom at the moment where we're working with different cities to try and take forward this kind of approach. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the impact that we had from this. So these are results from our pilot services. We found that when people engaged with this more coordinated working, when services were flexible, that the vast majority, nearly every client that engaged with us, improved their well-being on a number of different measures. And as this line gets wider, you can see improvements in things like their housing situation, their amount of harm either to themselves or to other people, their social skills, their alcohol and drug use. So we measure it at the beginning and at the end to see what's happened. We also had an external economics consultancy, an international economics firm, do some work with us to understand what the savings were. So by working in this better way, what savings could we see occurring across the cities that we worked in? This is data from the most successful pilot area, and you can see that overall, after 2 years, they saved 26.4% of costs to wider services. So crime costs fell through the floor. So less arrests, less people in prison, less people in courts. Other costs went up and down. So housing tended to go up, mental health tended to go up, substance misuse tended to go up. But you can see that the overarching picture on the left there is that costs begin to fall as we work in a better way for this group of people. So we can take that back to the partnership and we can say this is actually better for everybody around the table. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how we make this stick. So the seventh element of that MEAM approach wheel that I was talking about, which is about sustainability and systems change. So if we manage to set up something like this, which is a bit different, which is working in a different way, which is flexible, how on earth do we make it stay in the system? And there's been quite a big critique in the UK of work that we've done as a country over recent years, which is that we've always bolted on something else on top of systems rather than changing the actual system. So we've said, let's put a coordinator in there to make the system work better, not let's try and fix the system. So what we're trying to do at MEAM is to say, well, look, a coordinator is the thing that we should do first, but it's not the long-term solution. The long-term solution is to change the way that these services work so that we don't need the coordinator anymore. So we're trying to get a situation where we can begin to move towards that. So we ask our areas to begin to think about things like this, and it's early days for us, but what is the system for people with multiple needs? So as an individual with multiple needs in Lisbon, what's your system? What stuff do you have around you that matters? What are the problems in this system? So what are the things that don't work today? Which bits do we have the power to change? Because it's pointless trying to change stuff that we don't have any authority or ability to change. How are we going to do it? How can we test? How can we innovate, as we were talking about this morning? Who needs to be involved? And how do we make it something that's actually systemic rather than something that just relies on the goodwill of people? It's all very well building a system whereby we build good faith with different people in organizations. But then when those people leave for another job, or people change or money gets tight, these things start breaking down again. So how can we do something that's actually built into the system, built into the commissioning mechanisms, the funding mechanisms, etc. And the other thing on here that I just wanted to talk about was how we feed back what we know about broken systems to the system itself. And there's quite a good analogy which a colleague in the UK talks about. And he talks about a department store. And I noticed that you've got a massive El Corte Inglés department store just around the corner. So in that department store, there is probably a complaints department who deal with things when things go wrong. So shoppers that are disgruntled call up the complaints department. Now, if all that complaints department did was to write back to the customer and say, we're very sorry about that, here's a voucher, please come back to our store one day, that shop would be out of business because it wouldn't reflect on what the problems were. So that complaints department, it has to go out to the front of the store, has to go out and look at the shop floor, and it has to say, how do we fix these problems that people are bringing up? How do we make changes that need to happen? Another analogy is, for example, in the airline industry. So when a plane crashes, the aviation industry spends a lot of time working out what was wrong with that plane. It doesn't just say, the pilot was probably having a bad day, let's just hope it doesn't happen again. It goes through the system and it says, well, what was the issue? It conducts a thorough investigation. Yet in the social policy world, we don't do that. We tend to just blame individuals. So we just tend to blame the leader or the person that we think is accountable, and we carry on with the system broken, doing what it was always doing. So we need to get more like the aviation industry or the department store industry in feeding back the problems that occur so that we see them less. So all these problems that bring people to have multiple needs, we need to make them happen less. This is what we do with our local areas. So we stick a person with multiple needs in the middle of the picture, and we say, what affects an individual with multiple needs? And we ask people to work out. So from the individual, we have things around them like family, friends, social workers, key workers, we'd call them in England. Then you might have the services that they engage with across the city that I went out to see yesterday, and all the different things that engage them. Then you might have the local commissioning structures or the financial structures. You might have your local policies. You might have your national policies. And then as you build out, you end up talking potentially about things like wealth distribution. So how do we choose to distribute wealth in the UK or in Portugal? Is the way that we tax causing multiple needs? Is our education system causing multiple needs? Is our kind of class system causing these problems? We have to decide how far we want to go in our system. So do we want to focus on the nearby things, or do we want to go to that big macro level and try and address some of them? And we're not going to be able to do anything about this system until we decide what it is and how big it is and where we want to start. And indeed, what we think we've got the power to do something about. So we sit down and we build things like this with them. This is a map of those systems. It's tried to take a map of a system and build it for all the different policies and structures and funding and finances and outcomes and things that exist for that individual. Here's another one. So really interestingly, that idea about perception, everyone draws a different picture when we ask them to do this. And then we say to people, okay, we'll start thinking about what bits you might actually be able to do something about. So which bits of it do you want to change? So we try and get them to identify different bits of that system that they can begin to change. And like I say, it's early days. We've only just really started on this work, but examples might be, how do we change the threshold for services? So lots of people with multiple needs, they get stuck because they're not quite severe enough to go to this service, but they've got another issue which is causing a problem. Transitions are a big problem, so how do we get people to kind of move smoothly between services? Do we need better commissioning strategies? Do we need better staff culture and joint working? Do we need better funding mechanisms? Because a lot of our funding at the minute is siloed, so housing pays for homelessness services and health pays for substance misuse services, and the Justice Department pays for criminal justice, yet no one intertwines and interlinks the two things. So we're trying to get people to think about that in their systems and to understand what it is that they can do and what kind of things they can make a difference in, which are really systemic and not individualistic. So that's just a really brief overview of some of the things that we've been doing and to describe our 7-element wheel. I'd like to finish just with another short video. This is a guy called Tommy who also benefited from some of the services that we ran in Cambridge, in Cambridgeshire in the east of England.
Put it this way, about 40 people are dead since I've been here. Trust, there used to be loads of us. And that's in like the last 18 years since I've been here. I've been homeless and on the streets for about 23 years. My brother had to put a lock on his bedroom door. So I didn't, go in there and nick stuff to go and get a bag of gear and that. When I first come here, there were loads of people, a lot of people have died and through drink and drugs, and that's one of the reasons why I've tried to sort myself out. I've always ignored people since I've been here, because I am hard to work with and I don't like a lot of people. But when I met Tommy, and I'm very rude. A lot of people work with me because I swear a lot. And he understands that, and he's good to me, man, you know what I mean? And he's been really nice, you know what I mean? And he's got what I wanted, and shit up, mate. Now I'm clean everything. I've got my dog and that, and she's got what she wants, a garden and all that, and I've got what I want, and it's just wicked, man, you know what I mean? Tom's been so good to me, I swear at him, I'll tell him off, ignore the phone and everything. And what he does is, he won't leave me alone till I talk to him, because he's shit up, man, you know what I mean? He's alright, he helps me, man, he's my friend. I've done it, I've got there, haven't I? You know what I mean? Simple, you know what I mean? I've got there, you know what I mean? I've got a beautiful place for my dog, which is my best friend. I've got a house that can be everything I need, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Happy days, you know what I mean? Happy days.
Detail of the website, if anybody wants to have a look, is just here on this slide, the meamapproach.org.uk. And thank you very much.
I think we've got time for just a few questions. So actually, by few, I will reinterpret that as 2 questions. So if there's anybody in the audience, since you haven't got your headset on and that will delay us further, who can ask a question in English, that would probably be quicker for us. Is there Any questions? Lady there.
Hi, my name is Margarida. Two questions. Is this also this meme supported by the government, or how are you financed? And two, the people that you help are always supported by meme, or you give them tools in order they can have their works and support themselves?
So our funding at the minute is charitable, so it comes from charitable trusts and foundations, but we also work quite closely with the government, and maybe over time we'll begin to gain some funding from them. The second question, MEAM doesn't provide any of these services directly to people. We work to support the agencies to develop those partnerships and to work together. Those coordinators then work with those individuals for a long time. Sometimes, 2 to 3 years, because it takes a long time for people to make those changes. But the idea is that over time they'll begin to draw away so that the people can be independent and stand on their own 2 feet and integrate fully into their community.
There was a question from over here as well.
Thank you. My name is Elena Farrell. My question has to do with evaluation. You mentioned, when you spoke about evaluation, you mentioned direct evaluation on how people manage their lives. And in a way, you mentioned indirect evaluation in terms of opportunity costs. I wonder, are you interested, or are you evaluating the impact your program has on the public services? If you disappear, let's say, will the services operate differently? Okay, thank you.
So our evaluation is 2 parts. The first part is the well-being for the individuals. And we look at 3 measures. A new directions team assessment, the outcome star, and a tool called the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale. And there's some information on our website if people want to look at this. Also, the evaluation report is available on our website if people want to read it in detail. We measure the impact on services in terms of the costs, so we have a really good understanding of the number of times people visited each of the different services, and we take that information directly from those services so that we know that it's real administrative data. We have some kind of qualitative information on the different kind of ways that services are working, but we don't have a great deal of information on that as yet. And the question about would it be different if we left, I think in Cambridge I'd like to hope so. In some of the other areas where we're working, it's an ongoing journey, and I think we want to be, that's certainly our ambition, is that we get to a stage where those coordinators aren't needed anymore and those services just respond differently to people with multiple needs on a daily basis.
I think that means it's time's up. Our work will continue. Thank you very, very much to Ollie for not only coming here to share his insights, but also for the commitment that he's shown to working with the Foundation and MEAM and for these most disadvantaged people for the last 5 years. Thank you, Ollie.